In this video, we're going to cover the art of crafting competitive offers so you could land great deals. So let's get started. Once you've done the work to identify a great deal, you're not done yet. You still got to be able to land the plane and actually close on it. So here we're going to talk about some of the best ways to approach that when you're making offers so that you're actually able to land the deals that you're finding. You're not just doing all that work for nothing. For the purpose of this course, we're going to focus primarily on making offers on homes that are on market. When making offers, there are really two types, what I'll call traditional offers as well as creative offers. When crafting a traditional offer, or any offer really, an important aspect is to be aware of market conditions. And this is both on a macro level as well as on a level unique to the market that you're investing in. If you're in what's considered a hot market, where a lot of homes are being bought and sold, and homes that are listed on the market are sold quickly, that is considered to be a seller's market, and that the advantages lie on the seller's side. If a seller has many options amongst buyers, they can bid buyers against each other and bid the prices of their properties up and get higher offers, and ultimately sell their homes for more money. If you're in a cold or a slow market where homes are not being sold or not being sold quickly, that is what's considered a buyer's market, where the advantages lie on the buyer's side. In this instance, the seller doesn't have a lot of options, they're not getting a lot of offers, and you, the buyer, have more leverage and negotiation power and can get a lower offer accepted. The reason why it's important to be aware of the market conditions that are present at the time that you're offering is because it'll determine a lot about the number that you end up going in with. If you're making a bunch of lowball offers in a hot market, you're not going to have a lot of success. Conversely, a lowball offer in a cold market is much more likely to be accepted. And this is a big part of the reason why investing in a down market is in many ways advantageous. Seems sort of counterintuitive, but when interest rates are high, home prices are depressed, more people are sitting on the sidelines and waiting to buy the homes. That means there's less competition amongst buyers, less options for sellers, and more options for you, the smart investor who knows how to acquire financing and can make offers in any condition. Savvy investors know that a down market is actually the market to acquire properties in. When the market gets hot, you want to be the person owning the properties, not the person trying to buy them. In any case, be aware of what the conditions are, consult your realtor, consult the forums, and use anecdotal feedback from the experiences that you're having when you're making offers. That'll give you a good idea of what's going to fly at the time that you're trying to purchase. Additionally, when making offers, an overarching principle is to be aware of something called anchoring. Anchoring is when a seller intentionally lists a home for a price well above what they know it's worth, so that when the buyer sees that price and submits a lower offer, they're anchored to that number, and the offer that they submit will actually be higher than they otherwise would have. For example, if a seller puts a home on the market that they know is worth 100K and 100K is what they want to get, they'll list that home for 120, 130K to, number one, spot check to see if someone will actually pay that much, and also to anchor the number of 120 in a buyer's mind. So when they make the offer for 100K, they think they're making an offer that's 20K below asking, when really they're making an offer for the number that the seller wanted to get the whole time. It's a psychological tactic that shows up a lot of places, not just home sales. But if you're looking at homes on the MLS that are on market, you will see this everywhere. It's very rare that someone will list a home for the actual amount that they want to get. People buying and selling homes know that the amount is negotiable. The seller will simply accept the best offer they can get. When you're submitting an offer, you generally want to submit an offer for lower than you want to actually pay, so that when you negotiate with the seller, you meet in the middle. So in that same example, that $100,000 house that's listed for $120,000, if I wanted to say get that home for $80,000, I would actually offer $60,000 on the home. So in doing so, I would anchor them on that lower number, same tactic that they're using me on the top end, knowing that I want to actually purchase that home for $80K. Now the seller, when receiving a lowball offer like that, will do one of two things. They'll either ignore it or they'll counter. If they ignore it, that's okay. You're in business. You know the price is too low for them to even consider. You can use it as an opportunity to get feedback to see where they're at, and also give you a good indicator, if you're not already aware, of what the situation is, whether it's a distress situation or whether they're just sitting around waiting for the market to get them the number that they want. Alternatively, instead of ignoring it, they will counter the offer and give you a price as a negotiation tactic. So they list it for 120, you offer 60, they counter at 110. Now you know you're in business and this person's motivated to sell for no other reason that they're actually interacting with you. I'm using an extreme range for effect in this example. Generally speaking, the numbers would be a little closer together, but the underlying concept is the same. You make an offer below what they're asking, they counter, you then counter back, and eventually, if it makes sense for both parties, you meet in the middle. The risk with doing this, obviously, is that someone else might make a better offer, which will happen and is okay. It's important to know that you're not going to win everything in real estate, especially if you're looking to get great deals. Often when you're searching for great deals, there will be other investors who have more of a stomach for average deals. That's okay. Everyone has their own parameters that they're willing to go. And this is something else you want to be familiar with when you're making offers in the market. Take a look at what's getting accepted. That'll help you gauge whether or not a lowball offer is going to get accepted. An alternative to traditional offers are what I'll call creative offers. Creative offers refer to something colloquially known as creative finance. The two most common creative offers are seller finance and something called subject to. Seller finance is when the seller acts like the bank and finances the buyer for the purchase. So if we zoom out a bit and think about the normal process of buying a home traditionally, seller lists a home, buyer makes an offer, seller and buyer negotiate on a price. The buyer then has to get financing for that amount, which they'll either go to a lender or a bank, get a conventional mortgage, a DSCR mortgage, any type of financing which we'll cover in the financing module. But they acquire the financing from a financial institution. That is to say, they get the money to purchase the home from someone who is lending them the money. They'll typically need to bring a down payment, cover closing costs, but the majority of the money, typically around 80% of the home's purchase price, is being financed or borrowed from an institution. In a scenario with seller financing, rather than go to an institution, you, the buyer, would ask the seller if they will give you what are called terms, which is a way of saying if they will allow you to pay them over time for the property, just like they would have paid a financial institution that they borrowed money from to buy it. This can be advantageous for both the seller and the buyer for a variety of reasons. Most commonly, if a seller has a home listed at a price that the market deems is too high, that they can't get any offers for traditionally, a buyer with a creative offer of seller finance is a situation that allows them to get at or close to that number, or closer than they otherwise would have. It also allows them to get the payment over time, so they have consistent money coming in over a time period, and they don't have a massive taxable event, which they may have otherwise would have if they got all of the money at once. So they get the number they want, and they don't have to pay as many taxes on it. In concept, it can be advantageous for the buyer because you don't have to deal with a bank or other type of financial institution. You can sometimes do it with a down payment of 0. The terms are negotiable between you and the seller, and you can use the rent from the property to cover the payment that you make to the seller and take the cash flow just like you would have if you financed it. So even though you may be acquiring the property at a higher number, you can negotiate favorable terms so that you're still able to cash flow and you don't have to go through the bank and pay the associated fees with acquiring a loan from a bank or a similar financial institution. Seller financing is great when a home is owned outright. Typically, the seller is more likely to be willing to explore that option if they don't have any outstanding debt on the home. If the seller has an outstanding mortgage on the home, it can present some challenges with seller financing because the transfer of deed upon the sale, when the seller sells the property to you, could invoke the due on sale clause in their outstanding mortgage, which is to say, if a seller has a mortgage on a home, the lending institution that wrote that mortgage has a lien on the property. Part of the terms of the mortgage are that if the seller ever sells the property, the mortgage is due on sale, hence the name of the clause, meaning they have to pay the remaining balance of the mortgage at the sale of the property. This is why with a traditional offer and traditional sale of a home, the buyer pays everything at once so that the portion of that money that is owed to the mortgage institution that the seller has can be paid, and they would take the difference. If the seller has a mortgage on the property and they do seller financing, the lending institution will be aware that the deed of the property is transferred owners, and thus they may invoke the due on sale clause to get paid the money that they're owed on that mortgage. Often this can be avoided by speaking to the bank, but in any case, it's much more advantageous for no other reason that there are less complications to do a seller finance when the home is owned outright by the seller, meaning they don't have any outstanding debt, don't have a mortgage on it or anything similar, and they don't have to worry about any due on sale clause being invoked. Alternatively, the second creative offer that falls under creative finance is something called subject to. Subject to is similar to seller finance in that it's most commonly used when a seller has a home listed at a price that the market deems too high and they're unable to sell it using traditional means. Most commonly, this would happen if a seller purchased the home at a price and are unable to get at least the amount that they spent on the home back when selling it. When you sell a home, there are costs associated with it. You have closing costs, realtor fees, and other miscellaneous costs. So if you sell a home for $100,000, you're not actually getting $100,000. After you're paying your closing costs and fees, you're probably getting around $90,000 at best. So if you bought that home for $100,000 and you sold it for $100,000, you would be underwater $10,000. You would lose $10,000 because you'd only get $90,000 back. So you'd then have to sell that home for $120,000, $115,000 just to break even on the $100,000. So if a seller purchases a home at the top of the market for $100,000 and they try to sell it for $115,000 and the market has gone down and they cannot get someone to buy that property at $115,000, a savvy investor can come with a creative offer and acquire that property via subject to, which means in simple terms, you, the buyer, take over mortgage payments for the seller, pay their existing mortgage at their existing rate. That mortgage stays under the seller's name. You, the buyer, simply take over the payments on it. The home is sold and the deed is transferred like it otherwise would be. And as long as you have your T's crossed and your I's dotted, you should be able to circumvent any kind of due on sale clause. This is advantageous for the seller, the same reason that a seller financing would be, in that they can get the number they want. They don't have a big taxable event, although that's less of a thing with subject to. It's advantageous for you, the buyer, for a few reasons. You can negotiate better terms, similar to how you would approach it with seller finance. And you can also take over a mortgage that may have a really competitive rate. So even though you're buying at a high price, your monthly payment might not be that high because you're taking advantage of a 2, 3, 4% mortgage, which if you're in a 7, 8% mortgage environment like we've been in, or 7, 8% interest rate environment, I should say, which we've been in at the time of this filming, that can make a huge difference. The market interest rates fluctuate. So capturing a mortgage that has an interest rate that was set when the market was really hot and the interest rate is really low, long term is a great strategy to build wealth, because the appreciation on that home, even though you're purchasing it at a high price, will eventually, over a 30-year period, past that price, and you'll still have that 2, 3, 4% mortgage in your back pocket and not have to worry about fluctuations in the market. For both seller finance and subject to, it's important to use what's called a transaction coordinator. And these can easily be found online. What a transaction coordinator will help you do, aside from coordinate the transaction, is really the advantage is that they will help you with the paperwork. Both of these types of transactions require additional paperwork, and having a transaction coordinator who's familiar with these types of transactions can really cover your back and guide you in the necessary ways on how to protect yourself. A challenge you may run into, aside from the paperwork, which isn't really a challenge, it's an easy fix. Just get a transaction coordinator, spend the money, probably cost you $1,000. Just enough to sting, but not enough to bankrupt you. Additionally, though, a challenge will be the familiarity aspect. Both the realtor, if there is one, and the seller may not be familiar with seller finance, and even more likely are not familiar with subject to. Subject to is not necessarily household knowledge. Both have been around forever. They're becoming more and more popular, but they're still not at a point where the seller is guaranteed to know what you're talking about. So you want to check what the realtor and or seller's understanding of it is, and based on their knowledge, you want to use language and descriptive terms consistent with where they're at, not where you're at. So don't use any jargon, just speak about it in simple terms. For seller finance, if you're the buyer, you say something like, how about I make a payment to you every month over a course of XYZ years at ABC interest rate. If you're talking about subject to, is, hey, how about I just take over your mortgage and make payments on your behalf? That way you can get your number. Something like that where it's really simple and you're not talking about subject to or seller finance or any kind of jargon that may be confusing to people can really be helpful in my experience. The real advantages to both are your ability to negotiate terms that can be advantageous that you otherwise wouldn't be able to do with a financial institution, like length. One of the biggest terms that you can negotiate aside from interest rate and length is down payment. Down payment amounts are somewhat locked in stone, especially on conventional mortgages. Typically, financial institutions want to see 30 to 20% for investment properties. If you're purchasing a home that you're going to live in, there's some government-backed loans where you can do 3.5% or 5% or 10% conventional mortgage products. Those are rare with investment properties that you're not going to be living in. We'll cover more of that in the financing section. But for now, the takeaway is that when you're doing a seller finance or subject to, you can negotiate with the seller the down payment. So if you don't have a lot of cash or you don't have any cash, this is a sneak peek on one of the best ways to acquire property without using any of your own cash. You have a small down payment you need to make or some upfront costs you need to cover. You can take out a small private money loan or even use something like a credit card sometimes. Purchase the home and cover the ongoing costs with the rent that you're getting from the tenants in the home. This is a great way to scale. It's something you should get really familiar with and keep in your back pocket and throw these offers out really anytime it makes sense, which is a lot of the time, especially if you're at a standstill where a seller has a number that they're not getting and you're not getting the number that you want on the low end. You can come up and meet them where they're at with a seller finance or subject to type of deal more often than not. So in terms of how to make your offers more competitive, with a traditional offer, or any offer really, cash is king. If you can make a cash offer, you will automatically stand out. The reason for this is when sellers accept an offer where the buyer requires financing, often there will be a contingency in the contract that says if the buyer cannot acquire financing, they can cancel the contract. So this means the buyer can back out if they can't get a loan. This is obviously disadvantageous to the seller because they want to be sure that the buyer is able to actually purchase the property. And if at the time of the offer acceptance there's a financing contingency, they're not exactly sure that that's going to happen yet, and it could waste time. Often what you'll see with houses that have been on the market for a while is there were offers that were accepted and contracts that fell through. This can be a variety of different reasons. Contract could fall through because the buyer does an inspection and finds some problem with it and backs out during the inspection period. Or a contract can fall through because some contingency occurred In this case, it would be the financing contingency. The buyer wasn't able to acquire a loan. So if you have a cash offer, meaning you don't have to acquire financing, the seller knows that there's not going to be any sort of contingency and that you're going to bring that money straight to the table and there won't be any complications. Now, if you're thinking, what if I don't have the cash? Trust me, we will cover this in the financing section. You can buy houses without using any of your own money, and you can make cash offers without using any of your own cash. And we'll go through exactly how to do that. So just know that cash is king. Doesn't have to be your cash. It can be anyone else's cash, but as long as you're bringing cash to the table, your offer is going to stand out. Part of the advantage to a cash offer, and part of what makes an offer competitive, is if you can offer a faster close time. When acquiring traditional financing, an offer generally needs 30 days of escrow, which is the period from when the home gets under contract to the time that the actual purchase occurs, the closing occurs. This is what's called the escrow period. If you can reduce that time frame, you'll also make your offer stand out big time. Cash offer with a fast closing is really appealing to sellers and will give you an advantage. During the escrow period, you will need to have the home inspected. This is not the Section 8 inspection. This is an inspection that's done so that you are doing your diligence to know what's going on with the property and if there are any repairs needed under the hood that you didn't see from the pictures or the walkthrough. Inspections cost a few $100 a pop, so they're not cheap. You're making a lot of offers and getting a lot of contracts accepted. This can add up. However, I would not skirt this expense. There's a lot of gotchas that can pop up, and you really want to make sure you know what's going on with the property before you actually buy it. Contract will include an inspection period. Typically, this would be 10 days on a contract that has a 30-day escrow period. However, if you're doing a faster close time, you can do a faster inspection period as well, so that the seller still gets the fast close time that they like and your offer is still competitive, but you still have time to get the inspection done. Generally speaking, I would give yourself 3 days minimum. 5 days is better. Still fits well within 14 days, so your offer is still competitive and you have time to get the inspection done, get the report back to you, analyze what's going on, make any subsequent adjustments to your offer, and still be in that time frame where everybody's happy. So not only are you given a faster close time, but you're also given a faster inspection time as well within that. And once the inspection is done, they'll send you a report with their findings. This will include minor and major fixes that they've found. Inspectors are pros at finding everything that's wrong with the property. So don't be alarmed if you get a long list of things when you get your inspection back. They will always find something. You could have a brand new home and I guarantee you they'd still find something. It's their job. They should do it. You want them to do that. Part of the reason why you want them to do it, aside from the obvious of you just want to be aware of what's going on with the property and what your costs are going to be, or potential costs are going to be, an inspection can actually give you a lot of leverage in post-offer negotiations. And we'll touch more on that in a moment. Once you made a cash offer with a fast close time, additionally, you can offer an earnest money deposit, which is amount of money that you give to show good faith. Typically, this would be 1% of the purchase price, but you can do a higher EMD as it's called, to make your offer more competitive. Also shows that you're a serious buyer and that they can take your offer seriously. These 4 aspects, cash offer, short close time, short inspection, high EMD, combined can make an offer very powerful. When using the creative options, the best way to make your offer powerful is to make it simple and to make sure they understand that the offer is getting them the number that they want. That's the most common reason why seller finance and subject to offers are accepted, because it allows them to save face, get the number that they want, get some money in their pocket that doesn't have a huge tax burden, get a payment every month in seller financing at least, and be on their way. And if you do these things correctly and often enough, and you make enough offers, you eventually will get one to land, I guarantee you. Once an offer is accepted, you have the inspection done, you get the report back, you now have a list of items that you can go back to the seller and say, hey, I either need you to fix XYZ on here, or I need you to take ABC amount off of the amount that I'm going to be purchasing this for. This is a critical time in the home purchasing process where you have some leverage to get the seller to concede and negotiate more advantageously so that you can get a better number. You're already in contract, you've done an inspection, perhaps they haven't disclosed everything they should have, and some things came up on inspection that had you known about, you may have otherwise had a different offer from the outset. But because they know you're serious, you have cash, you're willing to move quickly, and you're willing to deposit a big EMD, they may be more likely and more open to making those concessions now that you have the ball rolling and you're getting towards the finish line. Otherwise, they'd have to go back to the drawing board and start over, and no one wants to do that. This can be a great strategy to negotiate after acceptance to get even better deals than what you had initially come in with. Word of caution, I wouldn't be too overzealous here. You still want to be respectful of the seller and not try to steamroll them. But the inspection report gives you a really good, hard example with hard evidence of things that are wrong, things that need to be fixed, and often this can be major items that actually do need to be fixed. And in that vein, it's also important to note that if the inspection comes back and there is some major fundamental or catastrophic discovery, this is when you need to be willing to pull out of a deal if it doesn't make sense after the inspection findings. That's why the inspection period is important, because it gives you, the buyer, the option to pull out and get your earnest money back. Everybody goes on their merry way. So it isn't just a negotiation tactic, so to speak. It's an important factor in making sure you're doing your due diligence when buying a property, which is a major purchase. And even if something isn't catastrophic, you may find that you'll have a lot of ongoing maintenance costs that would affect your cash flow based on the findings of the inspection as well, which, aside from being a negotiation tactic, may ultimately be enough to pull out of the deal. In any case, if you're making cash offers with fast closing times, short inspection periods, and higher than normal EMDs, you're going to separate yourself from the crowd and be able to make the most competitive offers possible, even if they're lower than what the seller may be looking for. If you add on to that knowledge of additional creative ways to make offers, seller financing, and subject to, and are able to simply convey these in ways that realtors and sellers understand, you will be unstoppable. I'm telling you right now, in real estate, there's much less legitimate competition than you might think. If you know a little bit about this stuff, you're already well ahead of the pack. If you can come across as a serious investor, a professional who does this as a business, the seller's going to want to do business with you and want to do deals with you. And with that, I'll see you on the next one.